The Organization of Islamic Cooperation reiterated its commitment to the establishment of a Palestinian state according to the 1967 borders and with East Jerusalem as its capital. Saudi Arabia chaired the extraordinary OIC Foreign Ministers meeting, which was held as Israel's new unity government next month intends to begin discussing extending sovereignty to its settlements in occupied land that Palestinians claim for an investigated independent state. Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan stressed during the virtual meeting the need for implementing international resolutions on Palestine. German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas warned Israel that its plan to begin annexing parts of the West Bank would violate international law, but has stopped short of threatening sanctions. Maas was speaking on a visit to Israel 1 month before Berlin assumes the European Union presidency, a role which gives it great influence in guiding EU policy. It was his first trip outside of Europe since the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. Israel's new unity government next month intends to begin discussing extending sovereignty to its settlements in occupied land that Palestinians claim for an investigated independent state. U.S. President Donald Trump welcomed Egypt's proposal for Libya's ceasefire in a call with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Egypt called for a ceasefire starting on Monday as part of an initiative which also proposed an elected leadership council for Libya. Russia and the UAE welcomed the plan, while Germany said UN-backed talks were key to the peace process. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo welcomed the resumption of talks led by the United Nations between Libya's warring sides and urged speedy negotiations to achieve a ceasefire. According to the World Bank's WB Global Economic Prospects report published Tuesday for June, Turkey's economy is expected to shrink by 3.8% in 2020. In its January report, the WB expected the Turkish economy to grow by 3% in 2020, but later published a review over the first quarter in 2020 in April, dropping the rate to 0.5%. The WB also revised its forecast on the Turkish economy's growth for the year 2021. In its reports published in January and April, it expected growth in Turkey's GDP by 4%, but raised this percentage to 5% in June's report. Lebanon further eased coronavirus lockdown measures by calling on civil servants to fully resume their work. This came despite keeping a decision by the Interior Ministry to regulate traffic on the basis of even and odd license plates as a preventive measure against the COVID-19 outbreak. Prime Minister Hassan Diab's office said that all public sector employees should return to their workplaces but should take the necessary measures to stop the spread of the coronavirus. The European Union expressed support to the Egyptian peace initiative on Libya, saying that it goes in line with the Berlin peace process on Libya. This was disclosed by EU High Representative Joseph Borrell at an online press conference after the 10th China-EU high-level strategic dialogue. He stressed that there is no other solution other than a political solution in Libya, which is reflected in the Berlin conclusions, reiterating calls for a ceasefire. UN Chief Antonio Guterres said that the peacekeeping force in Lebanon needs to be more agile and mobile and called for better situational awareness for it. Guterres said the changes could come from replacing some heavy infantry functions used for day-to-day activities with reconnaissance functions using smaller high-mobility light tactical vehicles and reconnaissance vehicles with improved monitoring capacity. UNIFIL can have up to 10,000 troops on the ground, monitoring the truce and helping Lebanese troops secure the borders. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said his country was largely lifting stay-at-home orders for people aged over 65 and for children as part of a further easing of restrictions imposed to curb the spread of the new coronavirus. Turkey had already lifted restrictions on intercity travel and allowed restaurants, cafes, parks, and sports facilities to reopen on June the 1st after a sharp slowdown in the number of new cases and fatalities due to COVID-19, the lung disease caused by the virus. In a televised statement following a cabinet meeting, Erdogan also said his government would provide incentive to boost employment and would support industry to maintain export and production-oriented growth to revive the economy. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged a global fight against racism and discrimination following the murderous act of police brutality against George Floyd that has led to widespread protests in the United States and cities around the world. In a letter to staff, Guterres said that the position of the United Nations on racism is crystal clear. This scourge violates the United Nations Charter and debases our core values. Republicans in the U.S. Congress have further escalated their pressure on Tehran by introducing the biggest sanctions bill aimed at paralyzing the Iranian regime and cutting off the arms of its regional proxies. It would include the largest list of punitive measures introduced against Iran in the history of the Congress. The legislation aims to freeze Iran's support to terrorism and to bankrupt the regime by stripping it from any liquidity. U.S. President Donald Trump said that he would launch rallies soon in 4 states, including the battleground of Florida, signaling a rapid restart to his election campaign after the coronavirus pandemic stalled it. Trump said he will start in Oklahoma on Friday next week before heading to Florida, Arizona, and North Carolina. Job approval for the president is also down after his response to the coronavirus pandemic and the recent turmoil over police brutality sparked by the death of an unarmed black man during his arrest in Minneapolis. Police departments across the U.S. are implementing reforms in response to weeks of protests against police brutality and systematic racism across the country. Over 1,000 people are killed by police violence each year in America, and despite declining incidents over the last 5 years, those who die are disproportionately Black Americans. According to Washington Post data, between 2015 and 2019, the number of deadly police shootings had declined, but shootings of unarmed Black people in 2019 increased from 9 to 14. As the global pharmaceutical industry races to develop a vaccine to protect people from the coronavirus pandemic, 2 Saudi Arabian entities are working towards developing a COVID-19 vaccine in line with Islamic law, according to a leader on the project. In the development of vaccines, scientists use live cells that need nutrients to live and survive. These nutrients could include elements that are not considered permissible under Islamic law, for example, ingredients derived from pigs like gelatin or bile. Eating pork and drinking alcohol are forbidden in Islam under ordinary circumstances. A World Health Organization (WHO) expert has confirmed the possibility of a second wave of the coronavirus disease COVID-19 in a number of countries. Maha Tal'a, the regional antimicrobial advisor for the WHO's Eastern Mediterranean Regional Office, cited Iran as an example where infections have surged again. Speaking at a press conference via video conferencing on the latest developments on the pandemic, she added that Egypt was still in the middle of the first wave, which has not yet subsided. After this wave, she said, another wave might hit the country. The possibility of disbanding Turkey's only pro-Kurdish party has been raised amid tensions between the government and opposition parties in the Turkish parliament. The pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party is planning to begin a 2-track democracy march to Ankara from the western province of Adrin and the southeastern province of Hakkari in opposition to 2 of its parliamentarians being stripped of their seats over terror allegations.